Okay, it's the end of the session. I'm here with Bella. This is Tokey, and that is Jake. And if we see a little puppy rolling around, it's the product of Jake and Tokey, and that's Uno. And in this video, we're going to go basically summarize kind of what we went over in the session today. So we started off with marker words. Marker word is an indicator that lets the dog know that it did the thing that you want. It comes the instant the dog does the thing that you want, like as soon as the dog's butt hits the ground for a sit, for example, or unless the action has, duration, like stay or potty. In those situations, we'd say the marker word is the conclusion of the activity. Next, we went over, now before, by the time you see this, you need to have marked or loaded it. So that means you're going to click, give the dog a treat, or say yes and give the dog a treat. So I'd like for example, for Miss Luna, we would walk around the house with 20 treats and say yes, give her that treat. Walk in the next room, yes, and give her that treat. And do that for about 20 treats. Then we would do it next with Tokey, and then do the same thing with Jake. Now, I also would like the guardian to do that with a clicker. So same thing, you click and give a treat. Yes, I appreciate the kisses, but it's going to be better if you're not kissing me the whole time in this video. So this is a loading exercise. You need to do this with each dog 6 times with a click, 6 times with saying yes. Now the clicker is actually better for training, but we don't always have the clicker with us. And we need to click the instant the dog does the thing that we want, and that needs to be followed up with a treat within 2 seconds. And so if the clicker is over there and the dog does something I want and I have to get up and go get it, I'm going to mess up my timing. So in that case, I would just say yes. Now yes and the click are the same thing. Yes is not as effective as a click, but it's in the same ballpark. So if your dog does something you want, yes, and pet him. We also went over a hand targeting exercise. That was teaching the dog to touch his nose to your hand. Yes. So the instant they touch their nose to your hand, you say yes, and then you put the treat on your hand and they lick it up off of your hand. And we use that as a vehicle to practice the timing of using the marker word. And then we also use it to incorporate how we can introduce cues. The cue is what we used to call a command word. We don't want to say a cue unless we are 90% certain when I say the cue, the dog is going to do the action. So again, if for sit, the dog sits, you say yes, and you give it a treat. And the loading is just to create a classically conditional response. You only have to do that, like I said, about 6 times with each one for each dog. It'll take you, since you have 4 dogs, it'll take a little bit longer than most people, but have that done within 3 or 4 days, then you're done with that. Okay, what else did we go over? We went over, we went over potty training. So remember, the 3 times a puppy is most likely to need to go right after waking up, 3 minutes after eating a meal, and 10 minutes after playtime. So we saw a couple of those happen here. So the dogs were playing, and about 10 minutes later, Uno went back over here and went and potty. So whenever you start playing, look at your watch, like, okay, it's 1:20, so I'm gonna make sure I take them out at 1:30. The more they're in the right place, the right time, the better. And I like to take the dogs out once an hour as a puppy. And go outside with your puppy. Have a treat with you. As soon as they get done peeing or pooping, say yes, and then put that treat in their mouth. Remember, you only have 2 seconds to get that treat in your puppy's mouth. If you do this enough, yes, that's celebrating. We're gonna talk about that in a sec. But after a while, the puppy thinks, this urine stuff, if I put it outside, you're going to give me a reward. Now, you don't want to ever chastise the dog for having an accident in the house or rub their nose in it. The guardians here don't do that, but unfortunately, a lot of people do, and those things have been clinically proven to make it harder for potty training. Now, if it's time for Uno to go outside and potty, I take Uno outside, I'm with Uno, and I make sure there's no distraction. So maybe don't take the other dogs if they're going to be a distraction, or your kids. As soon as the dog starts to pee or poop, hold still. Have that treat ready to go. When you get done, say yes and give the treat. If they don't go in 5 minutes, it's not urgent enough and they have forgotten they need to potty. Take them back inside, keep them on your lap like this for up to 15 minutes or until they get fussy. When they get fussy, they're most likely remembering, I have to potty. They go back outside, and then you can go ahead and follow them and mark and reward when they do the right thing. So remember, it's basically 5 minutes outside, 15 minutes inside, or until fussiness, until the dog does its business. Then you can take it, then you can go ahead and let the dog run around and be free. When do you introduce the cue? When you can predict that your puppy is about to potty, then you would say potty, or the word I use is business, right before the action. The cue always needs to come before the action, but you only want to say it once. And if you say it and the dog doesn't do it and you repeat it, you'll train your dog to ignore that word. Also for the marker word, make sure after you say the marker word, you don't say any other words for 5 seconds. Let that word really just resonate. So, as soon as the dog goes potty, yes, and you give it that treat. If it doesn't, you bring it back inside for wait 15 minutes in your lap or until they get fussy. Now, some dogs like being outside, and if we take them inside immediately after going potty, sometimes that motivates them to hold it so they can stay outside longer. So make sure you don't take your puppy in directly inside afterwards unless it's raining or something like that. Okay, we also went over celebrating. Yes, and that's an example of celebrating right there. Did I ask her to come? No. But the more that we pet or reward our dogs, the more they're going to do whatever it was that they were doing right before they got the pet reward. Remember what we talked about. All attention is rewarding. So when she was trying to hump little Uno and you were saying no, that's rewarding her for doing it. And this is how most of us actually train our dogs to offer the behaviors we don't want. Because they were doing something that's unwanted, we say no, we're bad dog, but to the dog that just is like getting a treat. So what we want to do instead is we want to give replacement behaviors. So for example, the dogs like to jump at the door. So what I had the guardian do was put all the dogs away except for Jake. When I came in the door, I had treats in my hand. I wasn't reaching to grab them. I had them ready to go the instant I walked through the door. I had my hands low. And then I gave Jake a treat. And he's like, oh, this guy's got the goods. Then I asked him for a sit. So he said sit. And when he sat, I said yes and gave him another treat. And then I gave him another treat. After a while, I started delivering the treats a little bit slower, more time in between treats. More time between treats. So what I'd like you guys to do is teach the dogs that when people come through the door, what we want you to do is sit down. Now, it's much easier to train dogs one at a time. So, and now when we go outside, we have all the excitement and energy of being just a new arrival. That makes it harder to learn. So what I'd like you to do, grab like 10 treats. Put 3 of the dogs out back. We leave 1 of the dogs you're going to practice here. Walk out your front door. Close it. Wait 1 second. Turn around, come back inside. Tell the dog to sit. Have a treat in one hand and hold your hands on either side of the dog's nose at nose level. If the dog touches the hand that has the treat, you say yes and flip it over and let him have that treat. They touch the hand that doesn't have the treat in it, you just flip it over. You don't say yes. And then you put your hands behind your back and you present them again on either side of the dog's snout. I don't usually switch the treat behind my back when I go again. I want the dog to find it. So now and then as soon as the dog finds it, you go back out the door, grab another treat, put it in one hand, walk in, tell Jake to sit, and then offer the treats. He gets it, yes, and then you walk out. Do that about 10 times. If you do that like 5 times a day, 10 times each, 10 reps each time, and have maybe your daughter do it and anybody else that comes home, after a while, the dogs think this is what happens. When people come through the door, if I sit down at the door, I get to play the guess which hand game and get rewarded for guessing the right hand. I'm not jumping up. We're training the dog to display a behavior we want them to do, and everybody's happy. Let me see, what else do we over? Celebrating, as I started talking about earlier, that's kind of an interesting posture you got there. Celebrating is rewarding the dog when it voluntarily offers a behavior that you want. Most of us, like I said, train our dogs to do unwanted behaviors. They jump up, we say no. They scratch us, they say no. They bark, they paw at us, we say no. But they come and sit, we don't do anything. They come and give us eye contact. They lay down at our feet. They come to us. We take that for granted. So what I want you to start doing is celebrating those things. Just like human kids, the more they get rewarded for things that you want, the more they're likely to do them if there's something in it for them. So every time it comes to you, yes, and pat under the chin or on the chest. Remember, not on top of the head. I'll do it right here. Yes. That's not really quite celebrating. I made positive represent. Now, that's something else I didn't go over here with you before. But let's say the dogs, I want to give you a way of getting out. So let's say the dogs are over there. Can you call Jake real quick?
Jake.
So let's say that Jake's over there getting a trash. Now, all attention is rewarding. So if I say, Jake, no, stop that, that's rewarding him. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yes. So that's called a positive interrupter. You can either make a long smooching sound like, or say, puppy, 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 beep, beep, beep. If you're going to use a word, it should be repeated 3 or 4 times in a high-pitched frequency, very quick cessation. So what am I doing? When the dog's doing something I don't want, I'm not giving it attention. I'm just making an interesting sound. The dog looks at me. I do the hand targeting exercise that you showed you. The dog runs over, touches his nose to your hand. You've redirected them away from doing what you don't want them to do. Now at that point, you need to give them something else to do. Give them a bully stick. Take them out for a quick game of fetch in the backyard. I think that exercise is a big corroborating or influencer of all of your dog's behaviors. So try to ask yourself, if your dog's misbehaving, how long has it been since that dog has had some exercise? Take him outside and play fetch real quick. You want to get one of those Go Dog Go machines that lets the dog play fetch with itself. If you do, throw the ball, and when the dog brings the ball over to you, hold it over on top of the bucket. If they drop it and it goes in the bucket, then say yes and release the treat in their mouth. And after a while, when they bring it over to you, you could say bucket is the word that I use, or whatever, place, or machine. And the dog goes over, drops it in the bucket, and it gets to play fetch with itself. That would be a great tip for your dogs, a nice way for them to get some exercise. Also remember, on walks, you can exercise your dog before you take it on a walk. That produces a much better experience because you're taking off that top level of energy. Just make sure after you exercise your dogs, they get about 10 minutes of rest before you leave. Otherwise, they're going to be worse behaved. Now, I also want to build in some structure. So one of the things I noticed is the dogs don't really have much impulse control, and that's something we have to help them practice. The best way to do that is through helping them through the regular activities that you're doing, teaching them how you want them to behave and making them wait a second. So for example, we talked about leashing up. Jake gets really excited for the leash and putting the harness on him. So what I would have you do 10 times a day, walk over there to where the leash is, tell Jake to sit. He sits, yes, pick up the deal, start to put it on. As soon as he gets up, put it back, and then sit down and watch TV, do whatever it is you're doing. After a while, Jake will recognize if I sit at the door and stay seated, my mom will put on the whole harness. At the end, I get a leash, I get a treat. And if we do that 10 times a day, and only once a day we go for a walk, well, now I'm only 11%, whatever the percentage is. I'm 10%, 8, 9% as excited because it doesn't always mean going for a walk. So I'd like you to do this a couple things. So Uno has a little long-term confinement area that I have my camera resting on. So if you want to let him out, tell him to sit one time. He has 2 seconds to sit. If he doesn't sit, then walk away, sit down. If you protest, I don't like dogs protesting in the kennel, but in this case, I'm going to wait. After 1 minute, I go back and tell him to sit again. If he sits, then I open the door and let him out. If he doesn't sit within 2 minutes, I say it once. If he doesn't sit, then I walk away. I sit down for 2 minutes. Then I sit down for 4 minutes. Then I sit down for 8 minutes. I keep on walking away. I do this preparing food, putting the harness on, letting him out of long-term confinement area, whatever these things are that you want to do, so the dog understands that I've got to do what mom wants in order for me to get what I want. Yes, that's celebrating right there. I didn't ask her to come, but she did something I like. I'm saying yes, and I'm petting her. And for celebrating, if you know the dog's on the other side of the room is going to come over, try to say the word come before the dog comes over. But the best thing, that's better if you can, but as long as you're marking and rewarding the dog, that's really what you need to do. Now, I pulled out some bully sticks, and there was a little bit of I don't want to say fight, but there was close to being fight. Now, Jake got very stiff and still. That's a big warning. If a dog dogs are normally wiggly and jiggly. So dog gets stiff and still, that's when you need to call them away or grab the other dog and pull them away, because that's a big warning in the dog world. And there we go. And so the idea is we want to be able to read our dog's body language. Oh, also I forgot, for potty training, you want to, in order to incorporate the cue, potty or whatever it is, you need to be able to anticipate your puppy's going to potty. Usually they'll sniff the ground in circles or in figure eights. And a little trick to do is take your dog outside and film it with your camera. And that way, when it goes potty, you say yes when they get done, give them a treat, but then you can go back and watch that video. And you get to see what movements they were doing beforehand. Because sometimes it's hard for us, even when we're watching, we're actively thinking about it, we don't know what it is. When you get to go and watch it after the fact, you can find out, oh, my dog, before he pees, he's going to do this, or poops, he's going to do this. And then we can kind of say that cue. The cue, remember, needs to come before the action. Let me see. We talked about not leaving the food out. Right now, the Guardian free feeds. I would put the food down in the bowls, and then have the dog sit. And then when the dog sits, yes, and tap the bowl, the dog comes over and eats. If there's food left over, as soon as they walk away, pick up the bowl, dump it empty. Don't take it away from the dog. Wait for them to walk away. Then dump it empty. And then there's no food again until the next meal. This is going to be important for Uno, who really should be fed 4 times a day. But also, it's good for the dogs to understand when you're providing the food, they should eat it. It's better for dogs so they know when food's coming on a regular basis. It also can be helpful if you have to give them meds or things along those lines. But also, food can be a high-value item that a lot of dogs like to guard. And adding structure is just really helpful. It helps the dogs see you acting like a leader. And you're not dominating them or punishing them. You're just providing good leadership traits. You have to sit, and then I'll feed you, or I'll open the door, or whatever it is. Now, also, the dogs like to paw for attention. And that's kind of... is there anything wrong with dog pawing for attention? No, but most people generally don't like it all the time. And so I call this a lesson manners, and basically I use the concept of a do-over. So the dog comes up and paws at me and saying, hey man, give me some attention. What I would do is say sit. If the dog sits, I say yes, and I pet under the chin. If the dog does not sit, I just go back to doing what I was doing before. And there's no reward. There's no attention for even doing the wrong thing. After a while, the dog will figure out, like, every time I come up and I paw at my mom, she tells me to sit. Maybe I'll just come and sit in front of her to ask for attention. And also, this really seems to work. When I come and sit in front of her, she pets me anyways without pawing. So these are kind of two sides of the same coin. So celebrating is rewarding the dog when it voluntarily does something that you want without you asking. Manners is if the dog interacts with you in a way that's inappropriate, like pawing or barking or jumping up for your attention. You tell it to do something else. If it does that, you say your mark word and pet them. If it doesn't, you go back to doing what you're doing. After a while, the dog figures out these are the things that get my human's attention, as opposed to the things that don't. That used to get attention because, no, stop that, is again a reward. Now, the guardian right now is brushing out Jake, and being Aussies, they got big fluffy coats. The puppy does not like it, even though mom was being very gentle. So what I had her do is, if this is the brush, and these are the bristles, thank you, of the brush, I had her turn it upside down, and she went the backside and then gave the puppy a treat. She did that about 5 or 6 times, then she did just a little section, treat. So we're making that, so I feel the sensation of the bristles, and then I get a treat. And we're going very slow at first, just a little bit. Eventually, we can go a little bit more, a little bit more. If a dog bites you, or mouths you, or bares its teeth, it's saying I disagree. A lot of people, when the dogs are aggressive, act what we perceive as aggressive, they say, no, bad dog. Never punish or correct a dog for acting aggressive, because you'll train them eventually, if you're successful, not to give a warning. What we want them to do is recognize, if I bare my teeth, mom is going to pull the puppy away from me. Because I'm baring the teeth is my way of saying, I disagree, I don't feel comfortable. So that's how I interpret a dog growling or often those behaviors. It's trying to get the other thing to go away. Well, as the leader or the guardian, if I can arrange that for the dog, it doesn't have to worry about it. Now, do the rest of them lick as much as she does?
No. Right now it's anxiety, right?
Well, it can be a sign of anxiety, but it also can be a way of showing love and affection, but it also licking and chewing. Well, it can also be a way of releasing those feel-good endorphins. Dogs that are something, it can almost self-soothing. So I would definitely recommend picking up a lick mat. Let's channel her licking into a place, smear some peanut butter or cream cheese, yes, on top of it. Now, right now, she just came over to say hi, but if she's chewing a bone, and Tokey was doing that quite a bit. She was going to every dog that had the bone. That's inappropriate. And so now if we are in the room and we don't say no for that, that's telling Tokey we're okay with that, which is not okay. So if the dogs are doing something you disagree with, you need to make sure you stop it from going on, but not by making a big deal and not making punishment. Maybe you do the hand targeting and you take that dog into the other room. Also, having dogs have time apart can be really beneficial. Sometimes we think that having the dogs together all the time is the way they'd be. If I have a partner, there might be some times where I need to be apart from my partner. She's driving me crazy right now. That's okay. And so for having the dogs have a little bit of time where they practice being in the bedroom and sleeping, or one dog's in a long-term confinement area, that's really helpful. It helps them kind of relax and ground themselves. Let me see, what else do we go over? Exercise. And so on walks, sniffing on walks, the video above talks about doing the find it exercise, which is definitely something I would do on every block. Also remember to have treats. Every time that the dog looks at you, yes, and hold the treat out so the dog has to come back to you. Sniffing on walks, like I said, burns a lot of energy. Playing tug of war is a great way to burn energy. Playing fetch is a great way to burn energy. Training is a great mental stimulation. There's a whole bunch of different, we call it enrichment for dogs. So you might want to Google like canine enrichment or dog enrichment, puppy enrichment. Little things like taking like a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube, put a paper towel in it and put some pieces of kibble in it, bunch it up together and put it in the paper towel. The dog's got to now figure out how to pull this out of the paper towel to get those little pieces of kibble. A lot of people do this with boxes. And I make what I call dog confetti, pieces of paper that are about that big that I shred in there. And I put in some food or some treats. So dog's got to use his nose, open the box, and then find all the pieces of kibble. We're occupying their brain. The dogs in this house, no offense, you're not, but are all Australian Shepherds, which are really smart dogs generally. They have good problem-solving skills. They're very independent. So if we don't give them things to keep them mentally stimulated, they often get into trouble. So we went over cookie in the corner. That's the video. That's the exercise where I threw the treats. You throw one treat, the dog licks it up, you say yes, and then say come. The dog comes back to you and say yes and give it a second treat. Then you throw 2 treats. Yes, yes, come, yes. 3 treats. Yes, yes, yes. Eventually what happens is when the dog's not paying attention, you leave 5 treats on the ground on the baseboard. And then when the dog in the same area they've been throwing them a bunch, and then you say, Jake, find it and point in that direction, he goes start sniffing around. Sniffing burns a tremendous amount of energy from the dogs. So if you do that, that's a nice way to get a little exercise here and there. Feeding out of snuffle mats. The one I like is the Runda, R-U-N-D-A. It has all these tassels and kind of a band around it. I flip it over so all the tassels are going up. Then I flip it back right, and I kind of waterfall the food, the kibble to go into it. Now the dog has to use its nose, find the piece of kibble, lick the tassel aside, lick it up, and repeat that 100 times, 200 times, depending on how many pieces of kibble they eat. This makes feeding them like a short exercise. So if you feed the dogs twice a day, except for the puppy should be fed 4 times a day, but the adult dogs are eating twice a day with a snuffle mat, or the orange ball that I showed you is the Omega Paw Tricky Treat Ball. They also have puzzles. I don't like the puzzles. I prefer balls or saucers and things like that. A lot of the puzzles, you slide things. I see the dogs, especially smart breeds like this, come up and they're like flip, 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 and just lick it all up. It's not really very difficult. A ball always rolls a little bit differently, which is why I prefer that sort of thing. But I'd like you to Google scent games, S-C-E-N-T. Look for 2 or 3 different scent games that you can do with your dogs. Now remember, for exercise, because dogs sleep so much, we don't want to give one bunch of exercise. We'd like to do some small portions of exercise sprinkled throughout the day. So we use a snuffle mat. We do training with the dogs once a day. We play fetch with the dogs once a day. Maybe they get go out on a walk. We play tug of war with them. They have the fetch machine. The idea is to get them an exercise about every 2 to 4 hours. And also exercise before things. So like if we're going to have dad come over, maybe we exercise the dogs out back. And exercise them and count the number of fetches. You might find that if you're doing fetch, for Jake, he needs 36 fetches. And then remember, always need 10 minutes to rest afterwards. And then for Tokey, maybe she only needs 28 fetches, and the puppy needs 10, whatever it is. So if you can calibrate what that amount is, and then get the dogs the exercise, and then 10 minutes of rest, and your guest comes over, your guests are like, oh my God, your dogs are so much better behaved. You're like, of course, we hired dog on problems. But no, you're setting your dogs up for success. Just like kids in school, we have recess and open period and gym class and all that stuff for a reason, to burn that excess energy. Dogs are tremendous athletes. They have a lot of stamina, a lot of energy, especially herding breeds. We have to get it out. Otherwise, we should probably expect to have it come out in other ways that we don't really like. I think you've already ordered a BarkBox. If you haven't, go to BarkBox and look at their plan online. They have I would get the mid-level toy. Once a month, they'll send you 3 toys. And then you can basically, open them up, give the dogs toys. There's a new toy, just like anything else. They get old and tired after a while. But make sure for the puppy, there should be at least a dozen toys in the long-term confinement area, as well as on the floor, anywhere that they're hanging out. Because there are multiple times he was chewing on things because he didn't have other options. I know it seems cluttered and messy. It's only for a couple months. Once he hits about 6 or 7 months, won't be the case unless you adopt him to dad, and then dad should have a bunch of treats throughout any room that he hangs out in. Also, puppies shouldn't have full access to the whole house. We don't know if he's going to have an accident or not. So if we put baby gates in the doorways so we can latch it and close, the dog can't leave that room, we can keep the accidents contained in one area, and also better supervision to make sure that the dog is able to, we're able to watch that and watch out for those signs. Now, our puppy classes, we let people take puppy classes before they have all the shots in because we disinfect the floor and all the rest of the stuff. A lot of places don't let them do that. The problem is once they reach 16 weeks, that's really the developmental period where they learn most of their social skills. So what I would do is I would post a new picture of Uno like online every day on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're on. And the way I do it that seems to get the best results is this is Uno, a 8-week-old Australian Shepherd. We live in Woodland Hills, looking for play dates. Then have a blank line and then a new paragraph that says, please share this with anyone you know that has a puppy under 3 months or 4 months or whatever the age is. And then you put another paragraph here. We have a fenced-in yard. We're happy to host, whatever it is, or willing to travel. If people will share that post, you really want him to meet our goal. We recommend that puppies have a play date with a different puppy within 1 month of their age. So if he's 8 weeks old, it should be either, if he's, let's say, 12 weeks old, an 8-week to a 16-week-old puppy. They give off that pheromone, so it's important they meet a different puppy all the time. Just like us, we meet some people that are thin-skinned, people are more confident, people are more boisterous. We learn how to interact with people with different personality types. It's important for puppies to have that as well. Once he hits about 5 months, he's going to stop being so open to new experiences. This is why it's really important you practice exposure your puppy by having structured play dates and exposing them to things in a positive way so they're confident for the rest of their life. If you don't, I have a lot of people, yes, whose dogs are really reactive when they hear sounds they don't understand, or meet a dog or a person or something they didn't meet before when they were younger. So that's why it's really important that we give him a lot of variety and practice. Yes, I could have rewarded him there for sitting, for coming, or laying down. Sorry, I had food poisoning the last 2 days. I'm a little off my game. But the more you reward your dog for the behavior you want, the more they're going to get in the habit of doing it. But it'll only work if you get in the habit of doing it. So make sure you say celebrate to each other and be mindful. Every time your dog does something you want, pat him. Remember, under the chin or on the chest or the shoulders, never on top of the head. Puppy, puppy. Yes. Well, these are some of my buddies. This is Tokey, and this is Luna, and this is Jake, and Uno's around here somewhere, probably getting us some trouble. And this is the roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.